Well, good afternoon, everybody. Give everybody a second to grab one last bite to eat, something to drink, and find a seat. I want to welcome you all here to Peabody College. Pleasure to have you here, a pleasure to have our distinguished panelists here. My name is Chris Curran. I'm currently the incoming Vice President of the Peabody Graduate Student Association, as well as a doctoral student here at Vanderbilt. And it's my pleasure to welcome a distinguished set of speakers to Vanderbilt today to discuss the roles of the EdD and PhD degrees within various aspects of education. The four speakers that we are joining us today are Dr. Lee Gilchrist, who is an assistant professor of the practice and assistant director of the undergraduate HOD program here at Vanderbilt University. Dr. Annette Little, the assistant professor of education specializing in behavioral disorders at Belmont University. And Dr. Kristen McGrainer, who is the founder and director of STEM Preparatory Academy at a charter school here in Nashville. And finally, Dr. Tina Stinson, who's the coordinator of research and data analysis for Metro Nashville Public Schools. We feel our four speakers sort of span the divide of those working in academia as well as those kind of working in the field-based practice. And I think they're going to bring a very interesting and unique perspective to this discussion today. Just to give you a little preview of the schedule of the event, we're going to give each speaker a brief bit of time to introduce themselves, go through their experience with their degrees, and some of the current work they do today and how their degrees sort of inform that work. After that portion in time, we're going to have the panelists move to the center of the stage. And we want to open it as a time to take questions, a time to sort of engage the audience in a conversation around this topic. We do have a few prepared questions during that time, but mostly we want to encourage you guys to ask things that you're interested in, ask questions that follow up on the work that these individuals are doing. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. This is Dr. Kristen McGrainer. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Hi, good afternoon. I'm excited to be here today to talk about a very agonizing question that I myself experienced before I came to complete my doctoral program, the EdD program here at Peabody College. And seriously spent a good couple of years prior to launching into any program debating whether or not the PhD route or the EdD route would be the best fit relative to my personal and professional interests and goals. So I appreciate that you all appreciate this question and want to talk a bit about my pathway into my current work as well as what it is that I'm currently engaged in post-EdD program. So this is one of our classrooms at STEM Prep Academy, and I just start out by talking about what it is that we're fighting for in the work that we're doing, and this is, I think, probably all too familiar data points for you all here, and essentially, this is Juan. And Juan at his neighborhood school in South Nashville. We're located right across from the Nashville Zoo, just to give you a sense of where we are in the city. It's the most diverse cluster in Metro Nashville. In our student population, we have over 16 native countries represented, well over 9 languages and dialects, and we are in our first year of operation with only 100 fifth grade students, so it's a very diverse school and population in South Nashville that we serve. I should also note that we are the most diverse charter school in the state of Tennessee, and we're pulling some of the data here in the Southeast region to determine the extent to which our demographics align with some of the other charter schools doing similar work in this part of the country. So this is Juan, and in his neighborhood, the neighborhood school, we call it our matched school, less than 1 in 10 limited English proficient students tested proficient in reading last year. To continue to give you a sense of our student population, at Cameron's neighborhood school, less than 1 in 10 African American males is proficient in both reading and math. So we are serving a very high need area in terms of not only academic performance and poor academic performance that's persisted for many years, but also high need relative to our low income population. We're about 94% free and reduced meals currently. So our mission at STEM Prep is to prepare our students for essentially the 21st century college and career pathways. So we have a specialized focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I think everybody in this room is probably familiar. Very hot topic these days. And just in a nutshell, our goal is to bolster the number of underrepresented populations in the STEM college and career pathways, including women, as well as people of color and limited English proficient students as well. And so our steadfast focus is around how we really create and cultivate this culture of achievement as well as innovation, because as you know, those of you who are familiar with charter schools, the thrust behind charter schools is innovation and how we can experiment with best practices and new practices and learn hopefully something new that can scale up in other environments. So this is something that we try to keep at the forefront of our minds in terms of keeping things innovative while also following research-based practices. So that's kind of an interesting balance there. But, and then also we're all about early access, both in terms of awareness and preparation, academic preparation for college. And then, I mean, at the end of the day, we want our kids to be able to compete. I mean, that's just the bottom line for us. So my EdD program allowed me to do something like this. And I think everyone probably appreciates this really fantastic graphic that I created when I was putting together our charter school application to make a very compelling argument around why STEM Prep was needed in Nashville and why the school board should approve us in spring of 2010. And so this is essentially what, I mean, it's, you know, sort of my attempts at humor, but this is very much what my program trained me to do, which is to think in this systems fashion. And to back up from there, pre-charter school application, I started my career teaching in Memphis, just a short distance from here, and taught in an urban environment, high-needs school. I was not a traditionally trained educator, nor did I come through Teach for America or a formal pipeline such as that. I had an undergraduate degree in English, but knew that I wanted to teach. So I did that for a couple of years. I taught in a school that had the highest population of students in foster care in the entire district. So I began to really become interested in how various public policies, social policies, education intersects. Or doesn't, and that was just sort of the beginning of this interesting pursuit of knowledge for me. And from there, then I got pulled into a university role after I finished my master's program where I worked on some curriculum improvement projects, and I got a little taste of that university life, and I was around all of these really brilliant minds and people who had their PhDs, and you know, I was just very, fascinated by that intellectual life and world and work. So I hopped out of my school and worked in the higher ed environment for a year. And I did that with, to be perfectly candid, a sense of pain because I didn't feel like my work in the trenches, so to speak, was complete. But I did that. It was a great experience. I learned that teaching adults was quite different than teaching children, which seems rather obvious to probably most of you, a little less obvious to me at the time. And at the end of that year, I just felt like I wasn't having the impact that really resonated with me to the extent that I needed it to for my own personal and professional life. So at that point, I hopped back into a high school environment, this time in an environment that was demographically shifting, and it was a rural, low-income environment, so quite different in several ways, and that's where I started becoming very passionate about our English learner population because this was a school that had the highest concentration of ELL students in that particular district. And just really started thinking around issues of equity and access. This was at the high school level, thinking about what does, my student over here who, has been in this country for 2 years, what are his opportunities when he finishes my 12th grade English class? And so, again, it led me back to those questions I started thinking about a couple years prior. And I then decided to start applying to PhD and EdD programs. At the time, I don't think fully understanding the differences or similarities, as the case may be, as the institution may be, and ultimately decided on the Doctor of Education program because, well, for a couple of reasons. One is I appreciated the theoretical and the conceptual lens that came through, and I'm talking about Peabody here, came through the EdD program here. I also appreciated the opportunities for me to develop my skill sets in practice. For me, it was important that not only I really bolstered my theoretical knowledge, my knowledge of the research base in the areas of my interest, but it was also important that I continued my work in the field and was able to create circumstances and situations where I could learn and hone my leadership skills. So the EdD was really the best, the fit for me at the end of the day. And I think that as I've thought about this conversation today, and I've thought about, if I could go back, would I have done this, everything the same way, and what would I tell other people to think about in their decision making along the way? I think it really, for me, comes down to I was able to one, identify what type of work it is that I wanted to do, and two, I was able to find a program that had the types of experiences embedded that would allow me to really hone my skill set to take me in that direction. And that's why I settled on the EdD program after much debate and thinking around it and talking to people and visiting schools and institutions both in this region and elsewhere. So that is my pathway to and through those graduate programs. And this image right here was made possible by the EdD program here at Peabody. And I think when I go back and I think about everything that we do at school, it's hard for me to imagine not having experienced this program and still being able to be a school leader in the current environment in which we're expected to lead. And I think that's just a really important point for me. So I'm sure I'm very near the end of my time or over, Chris. Am I good? I have another minute or two? Okay. So I would like to show you a video very quickly. Did I find it?
It's saying the whole world is watching you right now. The entire planet. You know how many people are on the planet? No. 6 billion people. Oh my God. They're all watching you right now. You can tell them one thing. What would that be?
That it's going to be school. I'm gonna be a veterinarian or a teacher. That's all I want to do. Then I become a doctor. Maybe a scientist.
I want to be a professional dancer.
been hungry because I've been seeing a lot of people out of their house and not like they don't have houses and looking for food. I've just been hungry.
Good question, I'm not sure.
I would kind of like stop time, and then I'd like help the environment, like picking up trash and cleaning everything, because I like to clean stuff. And I would like clean, and then I would unfreeze time, and nobody would know that it was me doing all that stuff, and they kind of like just move on. And that's facility cleaning, I just freeze time, and just help the world.
Okay, so this video is a little bit longer than this, so I'm going to stop it in the interest of time. But it's really interesting to hear, like at the very first of our year, our kids' conceptions around, social justice and giving back, and the uncut version is really. So anyway, I'll share it, but I will pass it on to the next panelist. But thank you all, and I look forward to our questions here in a bit.
Thank you, Dr. McRainer. The next individual we're going to welcome to the stage is also an EdD, and she is one that works here at Vanderbilt, so it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Lee Gilchrist.
Great, thank you. Okay, tell me if you can't hear me, because I teach in this room and I move a lot, so if you can't hear me, let me know, and then we'll readjust. But I've got kind of a little bit of a interesting, different kind of story.
Getting it on the video.
Ah, so I'll stand there. Because I'm not sure what to do with that, so I'll just, all right. So mine really is kind of a journey that has really taken me, I want to kind of go back to looking at undergrad, and I won't spend much time there, but it really does inform directly where I am today, because I am kind of a HOD Peabody junkie. I was here, oops. Did you have it up on here? I was here as an undergrad in the HOD department and came to Vanderbilt very naive, and my college counselor told me to apply to HOD, and I did as I was told and didn't know anything about it, and just kind of showed up on campus. And I think back at those times, and first of all, my friends who were also HOD cannot believe that I'm actually still in the same building. But it really, it changed everything for me. I didn't know that a place could mean so much to your experience. And even just the Mayborn building, it was a lot of comfort. As for those that know HOD, I mean, I called my professors by their first name. I had lunch regularly with professors. And then I began to see myself transition into a colleague, which was important to me because I think I came into the experience thinking that I am just one of many. And you were going to come out and scramble and have absolutely no clue what you wanted to do, which I kind of did. But I knew I had some kind of foundation, something that I could trust, something that I could build from. And it was just part of who I was. So finished undergrad and stayed in Nashville and became a director of a nonprofit here that no longer exists, but at the time it worked with women who were receiving welfare benefits. It was a couple years before the welfare reform. And it was amazing because I had a chance to teach. Part of the program was to work in kind of a life skills program, and at the time when I was director, our facilitator quit. So as you know, with nonprofit, you pick it up and now you've got 3 roles. And so I walked in that classroom scared to death. And then within a couple days, the women made me feel so comfortable. Their stories just motivated me, and I felt like in my element. I realized I had a lot to learn. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do a lesson plan. I didn't know that you should even have one. But the experience was motivating. I really enjoyed going to work. I loved their stories. I loved connecting. And so that really set the stage for this, what is this teaching thing? And at the time, I met Gina Frieden, who is the director of the Human Development Counseling Program, and roped her in to be on our board of directors. I'm still not sure how that happened, but thank goodness it did, because as welfare reform was coming down the pike, she saw that our program that was pretty much going to be coming to an end because the state was going to take over a lot of those life skills programs. So she said, you've got to move on, and I think you should come to the counseling program. And at that time, I'd been taking the women to her classes to talk about their experience, and really, I met Andy Finch. We were talking about and hearing how he had moved in from, he was in HDC and he was planning to go to the higher ed program. And so I thought, this could be something. I had thought about psychology a lot earlier on, and then wrote it off as, I guess that's not the path for me for whatever reason. And then realized this is what I need to be doing. I mean, there was no question. So moved into the HDC program. And I'll talk in a minute about mentors, but that was really one of my first mentors. Somebody who really saw something in me and saw a connection and really helped shape a journey. It wasn't just me trying to pick a major because it was a pretty day on Rites of Spring and then I signed my admission form. That's how I chose my undergrad degree. So I thought, maybe I need to be a little bit more informed, and she really helped me begin to take that into consideration. So came to HDC again back in Mayborn, and again it was a place. It was where I needed to be. I had a sense of community and colleagues that are still my best friends today, and that we have collaborated on many projects. Some of them are still at Vanderbilt, others have gone to different places. So after HDC, I figured, why leave the building? But I went next door. I actually moved. I went to Payne. But I figured, I knew I wanted to teach. At that time, during my master's, I had a chance to be a teaching assistant, which I know many of you are. And again, it was an immediate fit. I just loved it. I loved the age group, which was really my focus in counseling, was looking at the undergrad age group. So I got to understand even further that dynamic and in that context. So again, the fit. So then, talk about mentors. She's in this room right now, so I'm gonna put her on the spot, because she often puts me on the spot. Sharon Shields. And we have a running joke that I build statues for her in my backyard for everything she does. And right now we have a complete, it might as well be a museum right now for everything. But I met Sharon at the end of my counseling program, and she was in the office right next door. And she suggested that I consider moving on to the doctoral program and then work with her in her course, and then some of the work that she's doing in service learning. And I'm like, service learning, what is this thing you speak of? And so we talked a little bit more, and it was basically what I was doing within my master's program. Didn't know there was something to that. I thought it was something you did. And so I really struggled, and Sharon was with me on this journey about, do I apply to the PhD program? Do I apply to the EdD program? And really kind of struggling with that. And I'll be honest with you, at that point, I took the GRE many years before, and that was going to be an issue. That was really going to be an issue as far as which program I'd be considered for. Did I want to take that again? Were there any prerequisites? And I struggled, I really did. And at the time, the higher ed program, there wasn't a huge distinction. I think it's a little bit, I'm not as familiar now, but I think there's a little bit more of a distinction now. It really wasn't, it was hard to tell what the difference was at that time. So for the sake of really having a good chance to get in, I applied to the EdD program, which at the time, I didn't see any distinction, and I saw that I wanted to work with John Braxton, who was working with students, so I could get at that level of working with the undergrad population and better understanding mental health issues with them, how that impacted matriculation and so forth. So I was like, I'm doing what I want to do, and again, maybe it was naive, but I didn't really care what the letters were. To me, it was, who am I going to work with? Could I do what I wanted to do? Will this help me stay in the area and the field that I'm interested in and get me into that classroom? And I saw no reason why it wouldn't if I stayed the course. So I started the program, and to be honest with you, I started struggling because it was around, I guess, the second year of my coursework. And at the time, there were a few students before me who had switched from EdD to PhD. I don't know if that's even possible now. And so then I thought, well, maybe I should do that. Not sure why, but I was just, thinking maybe I should do that. So I did look into it. And again, it was kind of those life choices, and I think that's important to say. I became pregnant with my first son. Again, the GRE came up and didn't feel like taking that again. And I was enjoying my coursework. I was working with John Braxton. I was teaching with Sharon Shields. I was writing articles. I was doing presentations in an area I loved with service learning, and it just, I mean, why mess with something that's working? I'm in the building I want to be in. I'm working with colleagues I love. So, I just chose that, I'm going to stay where I am and move forward. What I did do, though, is I don't know if it was against the norm or not, but I created my program of studies that are almost identical to a PhD. So my program of studies was identical. So I didn't have a cohort because there was a kind of a divide. But to me, it was kind of following the coursework. So it ended up being very much the same program of studies. And so I got what I needed, that I felt like I was prepared to move into doing further research and publications, but also felt like I had the practical skills for teaching and so forth. So for me, it really was about that journey, and it kind of evolved as I went forward. But again, as journeys happen, things and people happen. And so, as I had both my children while I was in the doctoral program, I'm not sure I recommend that, but it happened. And, you make decisions based on what do you want, and I was pregnant, writing my dissertation a week after my daughter was born. Again, don't recommend that. I don't remember what I wrote or how I wrote it, but it happened. And so you make decisions about how you're going to move forward based on things in life that maybe aren't part of your experience right now. And it will change. So what you have in mind now may or may not be what's in your path or your future. So for me, it really was about those mentors. And I put most of them around here, people that gave me opportunities, gave me a chance, and that's what I followed. And now I can say it's true to me. Of course, I have regrets, or maybe I should have done something different, but I am not complaining because I am around people that keep me motivated, get me excited, and it got me really into a clear program of studies that has worked well for me for publications and presentations, and has also become very much an expertise for teaching as well. So that's been really important to me. And this is kind of showing you just a little bit of some of the experience. One of the other areas that still exists is the Center for Teaching Fellow. I did that because someone else before me suggested I do it. And that gave me the formal training to really think about teaching and how that you can sit and be in the process of thinking about teaching. And I was in heaven. You could have just kept me there forever because I didn't know you could actually be that intentional and that thoughtful about what you do in the classroom. And that has also shaped not only my teaching, but then what I've done with my work in research as well. And then HOD, my goal was that building. I saw it, it was right next door, and I knew I needed to be in it. And I'm just incredibly thankful because it was like you get your eye on the prize, and that's where I was headed, and made sure that everything I was doing would keep me in that path. And I don't know what would have happened if I didn't get hired. Then we would be in a bit of trouble. But that was kind of my goal. So everything I did and the mentors I had really helped me stay on that path. So as far as publication and presentations, I took a little detour because I met Michael McClendon and Jim Hearn, and as you know, Michael McClendon, he can sell you on anything. So I took a little detour off of service learning and found myself doing sunshine law work, but loved it. I got to travel and we did a lot of work, but that also helped me realize that the EdD, PhD thing, it didn't matter at the time. He saw me as a colleague, and this is a chance for really expanding my research base. And then really have honed in on the service learning, community partnerships, how different pedagogies can influence one another. So it's really around the teaching and integration with community has really kind of driven the work I'm doing. And then, opportunities keep coming. And I had a student, Sharon and I had a student in our class, now it's been 6 years ago, and he's a med student now, but he developed the Nashville Mobile Market. And he came to us and asked if we wanted to work with him in this project. And of course, as Sharon taught me well, you take it and you run with it, and I haven't looked back. So again, it's really about taking those opportunities and letting your passions and your interests drive it. I really don't think you can go wrong if you figure out what you want and how is the best way to get there, and are you going to be happy doing it. You can make adjustments within that framework. But I've done a lot more work with small group because that's what I teach, and that's been really interesting as well because it's kind of a new area to kind of evolve from, and met a lot of colleagues from there. So I think that's the last slide I have. Oh, Yeah, so I mean, again, for me, it really has been that journey. It's not just one decision, and the decision really was questioned along the way. But you know, I don't believe in looking back and what ifs. It's more if you come into that roadblock of, well, you don't have this or you're not qualified for that, then figuring out how to get past it or figuring out another way to, you know, get to that end product. If it's Mayborn Building or if it's another institution or another program, figuring out who you need to know and who can really support you and you be excited to work with to get you to that path. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. We're going to move on. We've heard from both of our EdD panelists so far. And the first PhD panelist I'd like to welcome is Dr. Annette Little, who is an assistant professor at Belmont University.
Thanks. Hi. It sounds a lot like people make a choice and decide that I want to be a doctor and I want to get a PhD or an EdD. I didn't do that. I had no ambition to ever be a doctor or get a doctorate or get a master's. Things just happened. One thing I struggle with in my life a lot is not being able to say no, which has gotten me into a lot of trouble. But it has also gotten me to some pretty cool places. So I started out with a BS in early childhood special education. And the only reason that I got a BS in early childhood is because my mom said I had to. I wanted to be an engineer. And my mother said, no, you're great with children. You must go into a career in which you work with children. And since she was footing the bill, that's what I did. So my first job, since it took me 4.5 years to get a BS rather than the typical 4 years, was in a residential treatment center for youth with some very serious emotional behavior disorders. Now, how much did early childhood education prepare me for that? Not a whole lot, but there were no job openings in December other than the residential treatment center. So that's where I started my job, that's where I started working, and I fell in love with this group of students. These kids who had some serious behavior issues, okay, who were throwaways. I fell in love with them. So I did this for only 1.5 years. When someone came to me, and again, remember, I can't say no, someone came to me and said, we have opened a new residential center and we want you to be the principal. I was young, I had a BS, I said, cool. Sounds fun. So I did that for 1 year, and then I decided I don't like adults very much at all. And it really was, I was very inexperienced. I was not ready for that position at all. So I decided I'm going to take an easy job, right? This principal stuff is too much for me. So I looked in public schools, right? So I did get a job as a resource / inclusion, even though they weren't doing inclusion, teacher in a public school system, and then the public school system told me that I was not certified to teach because I had an early childhood degree, which certified me birth to 6-year-olds. And I wasn't certified to teach, so they told me I had to go back to school. All right, I was not going to go back to school, but they said you had to, so I went back to school. There's another reason that I decided maybe to get a master's and not just take the one course, right, that I needed to become certified. When I was at the residential treatment center, they asked me to write a weekly report on all the students that was sent to the courts for the judge to look at, okay? And they were very particular on how we had to sign this piece of paper. So every week I wrote up this beautiful report and signed my first initial, my last name, and my degree. Every single week, as you can see. And the secretary kindly, after several weeks of this, came to me and said, you know, Annette, you probably need to either get a new last name or go back to school and get another degree, because this is not working. So that's why I decided to go back and get my master's. So I did get a master's in curriculum and instruction, and I took a job as a Behavior 1 teacher at an alternative school. Again, that was my first love with teaching students with emotional behavior disorders. And I did that and absolutely loved it. And I would have stayed there forever and never changed, never moved. Except someone put a little flyer in my box. And it was a flyer from Peabody, okay? And it was about their PhD program in special education. And it had written on it, and I still to this day have no idea who wrote it. You'd be great for this. And they left it in my box. That's the only reason. I had no ambition to get a doctorate. And I thought, well, it wouldn't hurt, what the heck, right? I'll just apply and see. So I applied, and I got in. And then I was like, oh, man, what do I do now? Because they said I had to quit my job. I love my job. But I quit my job and jumped into the program. So was it, should I go EdDs? Should I go PhD? That was never a question for me. This is what was thrown in my lap, and that's what I did. Now, I loved every minute of it. I had great advisors. Their love was the same as my love, and that really is the key to picking your program. It is not about EdD or PhD. It's about your mentors, your advisors. You find someone who has the same passion that you have, and that's the program you go with. It's pretty simple. And I definitely found mine, found my passion. I worked alongside Kathleen Lane for 4 years. I don't know if any of you know her. She left Vanderbilt this year. But she was amazing. I had an opportunity to do the ABA program at Vanderbilt, and again, I absolutely loved it. It was very, very heavily focused on research, but because of the ABA focus that I chose to go with, it was pretty much single subject research, which is very applicable to working directly with students. And so, this question again kept coming up. What do I want to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? Well, I still haven't decided, okay? Because something else may land in my lap and I'll say, oh, cool, and I'll go and do that. I was an ABA therapist and currently still am. After I graduated from Vanderbilt, I didn't do academia at all, other than some adjuncting here and there. I did ABA therapy for an entire year and absolutely loved it. When I took the position at Belmont University as an assistant professor, I continued as an ABA therapist. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to keep the stories real for my students. So when I came in to teach a class, I could say, do you see this scar? Do you see the stitches? Okay, somebody bit me today and I had to go to the emergency room. Here's what I did. Tell me what I did wrong. How could that situation have been avoided? Okay, so I have to stay hands-on with the students that I'm working with, the clients that I'm working with, to keep it all real for everybody and for myself. So I was an adjunct professor for a little bit. Another thing that I started kind of on the side is farming, and here are pictures, actual pictures from my farm. The beautiful cow, Charolais Jersey mixed cow, was a sweet little baby whose mother had gotten ill and sent to the slaughterhouse, and she was only a day old, and I asked the farmer, what are you going to do with this beautiful cow? And he said, well, nature will take its course, and she'll be gone in a day or two. And I said, can I have her? Like I know what to do with a cow, right? So he said, yeah, whatever, and I brought her home in a little dog crate, and I raised the cow, and from there on, she's now like 1,000 pounds, and she'll come to her name and all of that good stuff. But I have goats that I've taken on, and chickens and horses, and, you know, don't spread the word, though, that I'm taking animals, because, again, I can't say no, and it's become a big issue. But my daughter also has a love for animals. She has in her hand right here a baby mouse that she has rescued from the cat that she is feeding with a dropper that she did lose in my house. So, yes, I am still a farmer, and I'm an assistant professor, and I'm also an ABA therapist, and I love every bit of what I do. And if somebody comes up with another idea for me, I'm going to run and go for it because I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So, what's it look like to be an assistant professor of education at Belmont? We use the Boyer's model of scholarship, okay? So I wanted to give you some idea of how Vanderbilt's PhD program in special ed prepared me for the Boyer's model. The first one is discovery, okay? Vanderbilt has a very heavy emphasis on research, so I was very well prepared for that. And I'm still involved in grant writing. It prepared me to write proposals for the IRB. And then what I really learned at Belmont, because it is hard when you have a course load of 4 and 4 undergrad and 3 and 3 graduate level, to find time with everything else that I have going on for research. So the critical lesson I learned with working at Belmont is that anything can become research, right? So Belmont sent me, and I've got a picture in a minute, sent me to Haiti over spring break to speak to teachers in Haiti and to observe classrooms. And I said, cool. And I wrote an IRB proposal for it. And I developed some forms. And I went down and I got consents, yes, translated into French, and had teachers sign these consent forms so that I can collect this data, observational data, interview data, to turn it into a study, okay? Because it's something that Belmont wanted me to do. So you get really creative in things that you can do with that type of a teaching load. And there's a picture of me in Haiti. So integration, again, across multiple disciplines. That happens all the time. It happened at Vanderbilt with offering the ABA track and allowing me to explore beyond just my area of interest. And at Belmont, I really do a little bit of everything. And again, that's probably because I can't say no. Application. Again, the things that I did in the school systems when I was at Vanderbilt, my advisor had me doing full school-wide trainings very early on. She just threw me in there and said, here you go, this is what the teachers want. And so I trained school systems, I trained teachers. She involved me in all of her research. I was publishing with her. She was taking me to conferences. I was presenting. So it was really hit the ground running. So I had a lot of experience with that. And I still do a lot of conference presentations, professional development for teachers here in Metro. We had a training for teachers just this Tuesday at Belmont, ABA strategies that work in schools. And I never know how many people are going to be interested in that, but we had 97 people show up for that, which I thought was pretty good. So that Vanderbilt really did help prepare me for that. And of course, teaching. Vanderbilt has this really cool teaching competency thing that you have to do for like one semester, and it's like, hey, you're a teaching assistant, and that's good, and you're done. That's the one piece that I thought wasn't quite adequate enough for me. I was a classroom teacher. I taught K-8 system for 8 years before coming to Vanderbilt. So I thought I had a pretty strong hold on that. Although teaching adults is a little different than teaching children, it's really not that different. But I didn't feel I had enough experience teaching here at Vanderbilt, so I became an adjunct during my doctoral program, which is a big no-no. And my advisor said, don't tell. I don't care if you go and adjunct at other places, but don't tell. So I didn't tell, and I used other universities in the area as my guinea pigs to practice my teaching and to become better at that. So, and of course, now at Belmont, I teach a lot. That's the main focus, which I'm okay with that because I love to teach. Okay, and that's the story of my life.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Little. Our final speaker for the afternoon is Dr. Tina Stinson, who is the coordinator of research and data analysis for Metro Nashville Public Schools. So, Dr. Stinson.
Thank you. I'm not using a PowerPoint because I work in research assessment and evaluation, and nobody wants to see that. I actually didn't know that others were going to be doing that, but I do want to talk a little bit along the same lines of how I got to where I am and what I do and how the PhD program here and elsewhere prepared me. And for me, I kind of need to start at the beginning, a little before undergraduate, because I'm a product of Chicago Public Schools, daughter of a professor and a housewife. Yet I really struggled in K-8 schools, kind of was a little bullied, really disengaged by high school. I went to 3 separate high schools, and I hated it. I still cannot to this day figure out how anybody can manage to get it through high school. Okay, I mean, I had a vision in my head of a giant calendar, and I was crawling along trying to get to the end of that calendar every single year. So education was not top of my list of things to do. I wasn't even going to go to college. I was waiting tables. I was, not thrilled with waiting tables, but I kind of saw myself in that role. And I had a friend who was just begging me, please, go to the community college and take one class. I swear it's not the same at college as it is in high school. So I did that, and I learned how to write a paragraph, which I did not know from my K-8 or high school experience. And it's like, there's a system to this. It's not just this mysterious thing out there. And sort of through happenstance, got invited to be part of this sort of bigger college prep program at the community college. It was Truman College. And Truman College was a rough place. It was at the end of the bus line in the 80s when they were letting all the people out of insane asylums. It was at the end of the bus line for the insane asylum, and you would literally have to walk across the homeless people. And you get used to that, which is really scary. So I decided I would go on and get a 4-year degree. I had my sights on the University of Illinois at Chicago, but my boyfriend at the time was saying, you're smart, you should go to Northwestern. So I applied to Northwestern, and much to my surprise, I got in. I didn't know how I got in, but I did. I think the application guy thought I was a little cute. We kind of hit it off. And I got in, and it was really hard. I was not prepared for a 4-year, for that kind of competitive college and the competitive people I was with. I mean, it was a horrible, horrible experience to go to Northwestern University as a non-traditional student. I was 5 years older than everybody else. I took the bus to the 2 trains and then walked half a mile to campus every day with all of my books on my back. But I got a super good education there, and really loved the exploration. I couldn't decide on a major. I wasn't going to go into psychology or statistics because that's what my dad did, and I wasn't going to be like my dad. I wasn't going to go into English because that would be like my mom, and I wasn't going to be like my mom. I ended up in psychology and taking a lot of statistics because that was, despite what I wanted to do, what I am actually very good at. And in the process of this, I was in social psychology. I got very interested in anthropology. And so I went and got a master's in anthropology after a little bit of work time. I worked at a software company, statistical software, doing a lot of different things, learning databases. And the idea of culture really fascinated me. So I went and got a master's in anthropology and came to Vanderbilt to get a PhD in anthropology, not education. And while I was in my master's program, I worked for this psychology department project working with youths at risk of developing antisocial behavior. And I didn't know what was going on at the time because I didn't have my head around that kind of theory, but it was very much a deficit model that we were bringing into schools. And I rebelled against this deficit model with every fiber in my being, and not even knowing what it was. And having come from the schools I was then working in, this is just wrong. There's nothing wrong with these kids. They are adapting very well to their environments. The problem is the environment, and the problem is the way you are going about this with these children with your kids as the model, you know, with the MD parents and the, you know, this is not going to work with these students. And this always stuck in my mind. And though I ended up doing archaeology, I went and dug at Tikal in Guatemala, and was very immersed in the theory, there was something nagging at me that I needed to deal with the living, you know. I really didn't want to deal with the long dead. And so I started thinking, okay, I am going to work in sort of the sociology, anthropology of education. I can take this and go out into the schools and do a more applied anthropology. Well, Vanderbilt did one of its very famous departmental implosions, and nobody in my class finished, not one person. From that anthropology class, and at that time I was like, what am I going to do? I want to do this and I don't know where to go. And somebody hooked me up with Terry Deal, who used to be here, who was doing very much of the same kind of work I wanted to do. Well, he was just about to leave, but I sort of came in through the back door and looked at culture and education. I did qualitative work, even though my job currently, and I'll get into that right now, is very quantitative. I really gravitate toward asking people what's going on and working with them. But I have a very strong base in statistics and research methods from this program, but also from anthropology. And I took my stats classes in sociology, sort of to a little bit about what we're going to talk about next. So I have a very blended, cross-disciplinary set of skills that I got from being ABD before going to a PhD. Also, something I wouldn't recommend is almost finishing a doctorate and then changing. But life does take you on different journeys. So I came here and I loved it. I was a little quirky for here. Anthropologists are like hard-drinking, rough-living people. And my first ed conference, I was like, what is wrong with these people? Nobody's sleeping with anybody else. You know, nobody's drinking, you know, what's going on here? And I was steeped in all sorts of social theory that was kind of strange for education, you know, like neo-Marxian things. But I did an ethnography as my dissertation, and I went into higher ed, not because higher ed was my calling, but that's because I needed a job. And I got married along the way, you know. I had planned to be a professor, which is why a PhD was better. But when you have two professors in a family and one has tenure, it doesn't work so well. You can't move, you know. So my husband is an English professor. And so I decided to stay in the area and adjust what I did. And I was director of institutional research at a local community college before moving back into K-12. I took a pay cut, a benefit cut, and a title cut to go back to metro schools, because that really is where my passion is. And my current job is so varied, it's hard to even explain what it is I do. I have my hands in policy, you know, all the No Child Left Behind stuff, all of the waivers falls somewhere in the purview of my department and me specifically. I analyze data, I give people data, I've worked with groups looking at reworking our whole human resources department. I work here at PLAN, Principals Leadership Academy of Nashville, training principals on how to use data to inform instructional decision making, and also just how to really look at research and extract what you need from it, which is a skill I think Vanderbilt does very well in it, but I do not think the rest of educational institutions in this area do a very good job of that, I'm sorry to say. So that's something that principals really need to bone up on before they go and buy the $200,000 product with the glossy magazine cover. So that's in a nutshell what I do. And there's a joke in psychology about, you know, how do you tell the psychologist from the patients, and it's the patients eventually get better. Meaning that the psychologists really go into it because they don't understand themselves. And That's how I'm in education. It's fascinating to me because I don't get it. There's something about the whole enterprise that is foreign to me, but that keeps it very interesting to me. And my current role, as I said, and I do research in all kinds of different areas, it's across the board. It keeps it interesting and fun for me. So that's it.
You guys head up there. We just set this on the center of the table. Well, join me again in thanking all of our panelists here for their brief introductions. And we'll prepare for the question and answer session. We do have a few prepared questions, but in the interest of time, I want to make sure that the audience has an opportunity to interact and ask questions of their own. So if you have a question, we go out the microphone. The room's small enough you guys we have some voices on to be able to be heard. We'll go ahead and start off with one of our prepared questions. If you have a second, anybody you want to ask and show of hands, we'll ask questions among the audience. So to our panelists, some of you have touched on this already, but there seems to be this distinction between EdDs and PhDs that's commonly characterized as being the difference between a practitioner and sort of a research degree. However, I'm not sure if that description in some cases may be an overgeneralization or may not hold true necessarily at all schools. So I'd love if at least a few of you would just kind of respond to that distinction, whether you perceive that to be an accurate distinction and maybe a better way that we might perceive the difference in these two degrees.
I can speak a little bit about specifically, I guess, HOD. And there is a distinction because what you'll see with HOD is that the EdD pretty much is tracked more toward a practice title. So you'll see my title is Assistant Professor of the Practice. So I will not get tenure at Vanderbilt. I won't be offered tenure at Vanderbilt. But it does not restrict me if I wanted to leave Vanderbilt to maybe pursue it at another university. So it doesn't restrict you, but at Vanderbilt, that is a distinction you'll see within HOD. Also, you'll see within our department, I don't know, I think all the PhD, I'm scared to say all, but I believe all of them are tenure track or tenured within HOD, where EdD, again, you see is all within the practice piece. But that's also a distinction because you ask those faculty what they want to focus on, and the EdD say, I want to focus on teaching. They're all doing research, they're all doing presentations, but they tend to focus more on specific interests, and they come in wanting to do that teaching piece.
I can speak a little bit to this as well. Being an adjunct faculty here, actually, I was required to have a PhD to get my current role at Plan, so it surprised me that's not universal across the fields. In my job, there's a mix of people who have EdDs and PhDs, and there's not much distinction between the two of them. And in fact, people with master's degrees, if they bring the right thing to the table, they will have the higher position. It doesn't seem to matter. However, I also do review research proposals from universities across this area. And I will say that, and this is not a Vanderbilt thing, so there's a difference between, I think, the Vanderbilt EdD and the typical EdD. And we see some dissertation proposals that come through that would not have passed my first graduate seminar here at Vanderbilt. And it's very disappointing, and I think that's where the criticism comes from. And I have friends who are in programs more as a hoop jumping thing to get another job, who it's very, very easy compared to what they had done before. And again, that's not Vanderbilt's EdD experience, but that is out there. So, and I think that I was with my husband, I was promising that I wouldn't say this, but I was with my husband and a friend of his at dinner last night, and I was talking a little bit about this, and outside of the K-12 field and certain educational institutions, EdDs can have a problem. You have a perception to overcome. And, you can do that, but but that's there outside. And it's not there where I work, but it's there outside. And I won't even tell you what they were saying, because it's probably not appropriate for here.
I mean, I think that I think for me, the issue is really the institution, because like more so than the program, more so than the EdD versus PhD. I mean, Harvard has only had an EdD for, ever. And so I think it really is institution specific rather than program specific. And so if you are pursuing either path or thinking about which one is the best for you, I think as my colleagues today have shared, I think it's about, who is doing the work that you want to be doing, and like where are they, and wherever they are is where you need to be. So if that is within the context of a more practice-based program, then that's what that would be my recommendation for what you should do. Or if it's more in a traditional PhD program, then that's the route I would go. But I think why this question is so important on this campus, and I forgot to mention on my journey, I was also on research faculty here for a brief moment of time after I finished my EdD program. So I think on this campus, this question seems to be, and nationally, I know that's one of the questions that you have, a hot topic, but I think it is because there has been a lot of very deliberate thinking around the programs and how the separation should look and to what end. And I think that's, it's really a more nuanced, discussion there. But I would say the importance of the institution and the fit between you and your mentor or advisor is more important than necessarily the program, as some of my colleagues today have shared.
And I would have to agree with all of that. At Belmont, I work alongside professors with an EdD, those with a PhD. There's really no distinction at Belmont. Some are tenured, some are not, but it has nothing to do with the EdD or PhD. I've also worked alongside some EdDs here at Vanderbilt who are tenured professors over in special education who are amazing. So I think if you just look for your passion and you follow it, you can make your life whatever you want it to be, whether you have the EdD or the PhD. Because I've seen some, like Karen Harris here at Vanderbilt and Steve Graham, they're both EdD, but extremely successful and produce a tremendous amount of research. So you can make your life what you want it to be either way.
Well, Dr. McGrain, you mentioned that Harvard was one of the sort of the first to come out with this EdD. They've recently done something that I guess complicates this whole debate a little bit more, and that is to create what they call a Doctor of Education Leadership, or EdLD, which they describe as being a 3-year program aimed at combining dimensions of policy, education, and business to prepare practitioners. So the question is, in an environment that's already marked by sort of 2 distinct doctoral degrees, is there room for a 3rd degree? If so, what role should a 3rd degree like this be playing?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's sort of ridiculous that we need to add like another, credential to the table within a profession that has, I think, probably more combination of letters than, most. But I mean, I do think that I appreciate that move, especially now more than I did before, running a school where, it is, and I always cringe when I say this, but it's just true. It's running a business. And so I think that what they've done is address a programmatic gap and a knowledge and skill gap. But I can definitely appreciate that might, complicate the scenario, both, I'm sure, within, this field, but outside. And I know that there's, that sort of mirrors some of the other moves, in Denver, for example, to combine, a master's program and an MBA so it's, it's an interesting addition.
All right, well, we want to go ahead and turn it to the audience for some questions. So anybody that has a question, show of hand. I got a few others prepared then while you guys think. So I guess we mentioned a little bit the way we perceive EdDs and PhDs, and that maybe this varies whether we're if so, what sort of changes would be made in the EdD program?
I definitely want to speak, because I've read that when you said that to us. One of a colleague of mine who actually was a master's student here and is now getting her doctorate at Teachers College. I couldn't dial fast enough to see kind of what her view of this was. And they have talked a lot about that quote on their campus. She began to talk for about 45 minutes nonstop about how irate she was about that quote, because I think it simplifies the issue and then minimizes the work that's being done beyond just Vanderbilt, but at Teachers College as well. And there's a lot of disagreement around that, and that she cited a lot of work that's being done there, as well as other work that they bring into it that completely contradicts that framing. Not to say that there's other programs that do need to be examined, that do put other quality programs at risk. But it was just interesting to call her and see kind of what the conversation is on that campus around that. And that is one of their struggles too, because they only do the EdD degree. But, you know, I think it's one of those things where it's just a overarching criticism that I think oversimplifies the issue. And then I think that almost exacerbates the tension between it unnecessarily. Does that kind of make sense in there? But it was interesting because they had a lot to say about that at Teachers College.
I was reading also some of the Levine work, and just in the last few days, and I believe, because I only read one news report about this, I believe Harvard just disbanded its EdD program in favor of that EDLS. And they are likening it to the difference between a PhD and a JD, you know, a jurisprudence doctorate or whatever a JD stands for. You know, very, very practitioner-based versus research-based in that particular school. That being said, you know, because I work with I live with an English professor, and you know, travel in circles of academia, not here at Vanderbilt, by the way, at MTSU. This goes at the undergraduate and graduate level as well, that for whatever reason, they've all had problems with the education students, you know, that they think that, the person I had dinner with last night talked about having to convene a panel of how to deal with education students who couldn't master the English classes like all of the other majors. And the relatively lower GRE scores of education students going on for PhDs. And that's a much bigger problem than an EdD or a PhD is, you know, how do we recruit, and that's not a problem Vanderbilt has, okay? So, you know, how do we recruit the best and the brightest into these fields and keep them here, you know, where we so desperately need the best and brightest minds.
I don't have a lot of experience with the EdD programs to speak on it, other than I've had some friends go through it, and a lot of them have come and asked me to do the statistical analyses part of their dissertation, and we had lots of mini lessons on what it means and how to write up results. And that's with some of the, not Vanderbilt, but some of the other universities, so I understand where you're coming from, but the research was not their focus. So I think they were well prepared for the jobs they were going back into in the school systems, but probably not so much for the research field. So, you know, that is something to take into consideration if you're looking at universities in the area.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, you know, it comes back again to, you know, that right program and institution fit, and then for what purpose. And a lot of times this discussion is always so interesting to me, and we had it a lot in my cohort going through, and I was an LPO, by the way. We had this all the time, that it was sort of a, you know, well, who, like, you know, is one up here and one's down here? It wasn't a, well, here's this one to do X and this one to do Y, but X isn't greater than Y. And I think that is just something to keep in mind. It's, you know, what is the, like, what's your end game? And if your end game is to, you know, make your impact within an organization, an LEA, a state agency, a you know, grassroots organization where you need to hone your interpersonal skills, your leadership skills, your ability to manage finances. I mean, if that's your end game, then you need to go to that program. But if it's, you know, to make your mark in, you know, advancing scholarship and contributing to the knowledge base and, you know, to share that knowledge to impact practice, then that's, you know, that's the route. But I think it's really, you know, what is your purpose, and then what's that program fit for you?
Thank you. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions, and some of our ED students are going to have to slip off the class here in a minute, but one in the back.
Sure. My name is Jeremy Burgoyne. I'm a second-year master's student in higher education administration program. And so my question, I guess, is a little more general. For me, coming out, I'll graduate in May. I know that I'm not ready to go into a PhD or an EdD program, but I know down the line that's something I'm interested in. Could you talk maybe just generally about experiences or skill sets, capacities that we should be looking to build in our early experiences that you think would be valuable when it does come time to be in those programs? Because as I'm thinking through, you know, looking at job descriptions, what things should I be looking for that will help me, you know, later on down the line?
Never stop asking questions and exploring and looking into new ways of doing things. And then you'll be fine.
I mean, I would say, you know, find a high-performing organization in whatever field that is, even if it isn't your first field of choice. And I think that you'll find, you know, the people that like have made that organization high-performing, and like that's who you need to learn from. And that's, I just think, and I was so regretful that I did not mention the importance of support and network and mentors when you all were talking, because it really makes all of the difference. And whenever I think about those twists and turns in my path, it was the result of a conversation with you know, a mentor along the way. So I would say, you know, find that high-performing entity and, you know, go there. That's my thought.
I think also, I mean, all of us have worked outside of, you know, the strict academic path. There's so much of interest in the world, you know, or I could do 4 PhDs, not 4 dissertations, but 4 PhDs, because there's so many things out there that are interesting that you could study. And if you find yourself at a job that interests you, you know, you're going to find something you don't even know at this point is going to interest you down the road. You know, if you know generally higher ed, you could end up in a place that's not what your first love is, but it's going to take you somewhere else, you know.
And I'll just be honest, because I just watched a colleague go through the round of PhD selection. If you're going to look at a research one, you got to get some research experience. And I think that same goes with questioning. It doesn't have to be, it can take a lot of different forms, but I think it's kind of what Annette was saying, the inquiry, knowing how to ask questions, know when to ask questions, know what to do with those questions, because you'll need to talk about that, you'll need to demonstrate it, and it's got to be part of your path. So kind of a clear agenda about what you are wanting to do, whatever organization that's going to be in. But if you're looking at Research One, you're going to be competing with people who have that direct experience, however that might look.
Great. Thank you. I know our EDs need to run out for class. I want to welcome you guys to do that. I think we saw one more hand up here. Maybe we'll make this our last question. I'm sure our panelists, if they have a little time, would be happy to stick around and talk to you guys one-on-one afterwards. We're going to see one more hand up front.
I think in a more personal level, for those of us who went to graduate school, we've been working with the community and work, you know, and we're passionate about our work and we're debating to go back and get our PhDs or EdDs is something that I struggle with a lot. Am I going to be confined to a curriculum, to a cubicle all day doing research, looking at data, and we're going to be missing our students? Like, how do you cope with that? Is there opportunity to do that while you're getting your EdD or PhD? Or is something that's going too long for 3 years? It's going to be
Well, I think one thing that we all had in common is we probably took on too much during every stage of the experience. I think you make it what you want. yeah, I'm probably not the best role model either at saying no, but if something comes up, you make it to what you want. I think it's as restrictive as you want it to be or you need it to be. And then of course your journey changes. You'll have something going on and then something unexpected happens or something planned that you were planning. You know, you just never know, but I think it's only as restricted as you want. But it's, I don't think any of us stayed really on a limited path on that one, it sounds like.
And I work with some students who are getting their EdDs from here right now, and they're all practicing. You know, some of them are teaching, some of them are in central office roles, but that's the nice thing about EdD programs typically, is that they allow you to work, whereas a PhD, you just can't.
You have to use your
right.
research or teaching opportunities, like a research assistant or a teaching assistant as your opportunity, I guess would be more.
Yeah, exactly. But you definitely get a lot of student interaction that way. But it is undergraduate as opposed to K-8 or K-12, whatever your interest is.
And I was able to teach and work with not only teachers but students in my PhD program, even though they told me I had to quit my job. And that was hard. But the research that I was involved in included schools. And so I was doing intervention studies out in schools, and I was working with the children again, and I was working with the teachers, and so I didn't miss that piece. I felt I had that. So again, that's looking at which program, which advisor that you want to work with.
I do want to say, though, you do have to make choices, because I was struggling about going on and becoming a counselor and having private practice on the side, but that would take time. I had to drop it. I mean, I had to make that deliberate choice. Is that something I'm going to pursue or not? And I could not continue that on. So that's one thing I do. That's one of those regrets that I wish I could have, but it just was not going to be feasible. So it breaks my heart, but, you know, it's kind of one of those things you have to kind of manage.
Well, and I mean, I would just echo those things, everything that's been said, but, you know, I think it's about finding, you know, those opportunities for you to do like that field work or that, you know, community organizing or that, whatever that is. And within the context, to the extent that you have the ability to, or maybe you don't have the ability to, but you just sleep a couple hours less. You know, make sure, that you know, build that in. I think that, you know, that's very important. And I think one of my early mentors always, she said this to me, and it feels very appropriate now, is, because I wrestled with this practice research question a lot, because so many things do interest me, and I do have problems saying no, and she said, you know, don't let others' visions or beliefs in you dictate your own path. And I think when you have, you know, and I know you do, when you have like an incredible amount of talent, or you're really interested in, you always say yes, you know, I'll do that, then I think that sometimes those opportunities can lead you in a path that you never anticipated, but you also have to do a self-check along the way, at least I did, and think, you know, is this still, you know, whose path is this? Is this really mine? And making sure I was still building in what I personally needed. I think that oftentimes, especially in fantastic institutions like this, where there are so many opportunities, you know, sometimes you can lose that self-check. So that's my last thought.
I think that's a good thought to end on. I want to thank all of you for coming out today to our panel.